Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Even as more people searched for work and the population continued to grow, the unemployment rate rose to 5.4%, the highest it's been in over a year. And bear sightings seem to be increasing across BC. So, how bear aware are you? And our gardening expert, Brian Minter, is here to answer all of your questions. I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. As mentioned, the unemployment rate in Canada rose to 5.4% in June, and the economy saw an added 60,000 jobs. That's according to new numbers from Statistics Canada released today. It's the second month in a row the unemployment rate has risen. Here in BC, unemployment hit 5.6% in June, and the province has taken a hit, losing 2,600 jobs last month. For more on what this all means, we're joined now by Christian St. Cyr. He's a labor market expert and publisher of the BC Labor Market Report. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks so much for joining us. So, how does the unemployment rate and available jobs in BC compare to the rest of Canada, according to these new numbers?
We're about in the middle of the pack.
Okay.
As we came out of the pandemic, we were continuously posting the lowest unemployment in the country. But as we kind of return to more normal circumstances, BC has come down the list a little bit. About a year ago, our unemployment rate was like a full percentage point lower than it is today. And we're on the tail end of about 4 months of seeing it continually increase.
Okay. And we've heard a lot from employers over the last year or so about what they perceive as a labor shortage. So why would they be seeing that if our unemployment rate is actually going up?
Well, I've been looking at labor market information for the last 20 years. And usually in any typical month, you'll see both the unemployment rate go up and the employment or the number of employment people go down. And for the last couple of months, we've seen this odd situation where the number of people who are employed goes up, as does the unemployment rate at the same time. And it's because we've just had a huge influx of people into the country, into the province in the last year, with so many immigrants coming to Canada, and many of whom settling in the large urban centers. And since Metro Vancouver, at least, is one of the three largest urban centers in the country, we've been attracting a lot of people to the province.
Oh, okay. And what are some of the sectors that are contributing the most to the unemployment trending upwards now?
Well, historically, you could look at an industry and say, okay, well, it has a high level of unemployment because there's not a lot of jobs there.
Right.
But a lot of the sectors that we really look at that have higher levels of unemployment, like agriculture, food service, hospitality, it's because they're primarily entry-level jobs. And that's where we see a lot of people, this sort of odd combination of a lot of jobs are going unfilled, and yet a lot of people are still looking for those jobs. And I think it's because employers are becoming more less flexible in terms of what they're willing to do. They want people who are ready on day one to start in those jobs.
And why is that? Like, they're just not wanting to invest? Like, is the training too expensive? Are people not staying long term?
I think it's like a lot of our lives. The idea is that people are going to turn over, especially if you're hiring people who are more qualified than what the position provides. So take, for instance, Ukrainian refugees. They'll be coming with bachelor's in science degrees, and they don't necessarily want to hire them for a customer service role because they feel like they'll be gone. But because they're so busy, they don't feel like they have that time for training. And so you have a lot of turnover because people don't get the training that they need when they first start in a role.
Okay. And is the higher cost or the higher rate for the sort of minimum wage, does that at all impact, who people are hiring? Are employers at all thinking that if they are putting out an extra amount of money, then they want somebody that maybe has higher qualifications or is more willing to stay long term or is more mature? Does that factor in at all to these numbers?
I think that's definitely a factor, but there's a lot of things. The rising rate of inflation, the cost of operating your business, the inability to find staff, and the minimum wage going up have all impacted employers. And I think probably the most thing that we're seeing out of this is a lot of very sort of entry-level jobs are now being automated away by technology, but in many cases just apps that a lot of restaurants and food service establishments are turning to apps to do a lot of work that frontline workers would have once done. And this is a trend that's happening throughout Canada and across the world.
Right. And we're also seeing a lot of concerns about as you said, automation, but also AI. So how could we see that contribute to unemployment in the future. And I know with the strike down at the ports, that's one thing they're very concerned about is their job security in the face of automation. Sorry. Is this something that you'll see?
Yeah, I think this is what. Yeah, no, I think this is one of those trends that has been going along since the Industrial Revolution. I think we are trying to compete with ports up and down the west coast of North America. And so automation is one of those things that will inevitably happen. And how we resolve the port strike in the meantime, I think, is a huge challenge for us. This said, when you automate positions, you create new positions that are much more skilled. If I used a really simple example, many of us can go into a fast food restaurant. There's a menu board. Well, those menu boards are designed to replace people who are doing sort of the customer service ordering. At the same time, you're creating a lot of new jobs to service, install, maintain those menu boards that require a much higher skill level. The sad challenge is that a lot of the people who are getting displaced are not going to have the skills or abilities to get into those much more technical jobs.
So then the next factor is education, I suppose, to sort of retrain and get them higher up. And what about AI? We keep hearing about this and people fear it's going to wipe out the job market, but is that realistic?
I think that the jobs that have the best potential in the labor market are the high-touch jobs, and not just where you physically need people like healthcare occupations, but where you need people to persuade people or to empathize with people, or where you need creative ability. And I think, like all other technology, AI is a tool, and it's going to serve those people. Those people will, at the end of the day, be much more productive. I think when people are doing very rudimentary jobs, like they're just entering information at a computer console, and actually probably a good example is BC Ferries, who announced a plan a couple months ago to create a lot more technology. The idea is to replace a lot of the interface that we currently have with people. Those are the kind of jobs that I think are going to be replaced by AI.
Okay, but we do still need that human touch in many situations. Finally, there's been speculation about a possible recession in Canada's economy. So how much of a factor could that actually be in today's numbers?
It's interesting because we've been on recession watch for a year now, and everybody feels like it's just around the corner. My big challenge is that we look at our unemployment numbers and think, okay, well, it's not going to be a recession, or it's not going to be as bad because we don't see the unemployment rate going up as much as it would a previous recession.
Right.
But we have this population imbalance where we just have far fewer people going into the workforce than we did in previous generations. So I think that's a misleading indicator.
Okay.
I think a recession is on the horizon. I think the challenge more is that it's concerning employers, that employers who've had positions to fill are choosing not to fill those positions out of fear of the recession.
Oh, okay. So perhaps it's just a wait and see. And once they see that's not necessarily the case, then we'll see things expanding and opening up.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, one of two ways to go. Either that could be the case is as recession fears go away, people start returning to norms.
Right.
Or we end up with a massive recession. And I think what that does is it amplifies things like automation and contracting out and globalization.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time, Christian.
It's my pleasure.
All right. That was Christian St. Cyr. He is a labor market expert and publisher of the BC Labor Market Report. And switching gears now, we all know that here in BC, we often get up and close and personal with wildlife. And our very own CBC's Sarah Galashian had a bit of a battle with a pair of bears who took over her kids' trampoline in their Coquitlam backyard. Take a look.
Out you come. That's right. Yes. Good, good. There you go. You too.
And I think Sarah scolding bears is my favorite thing ever. Sarah says the bears are extra prevalent in her neighborhood these days. And there have been some more serious bear encounters in the province recently. A tree planter in northeastern BC has been airlifted to a Prince George hospital after a bear attack. That person is reported to be in stable condition. Conservation officers are trying to track down the bear and find out more about the situation. But every year, we hear about bears coming close to residential areas. The New Westminster Police Department helped track down and relocate a bear yesterday. In June, people in East Vancouver got a shock when a black bear was spotted near Turner Street and Victoria Drive. And today on the program, we want to hear from you. Are there bears near your community? And can we make sure people and bears coexist peacefully in this province? Call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And for more on this, we've reached Andrea Wallace. She is the Wildlife Animal Welfare Manager at the BC SPCA. Thanks for joining us, Andrea. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's been a lot of bear action. In fact, our colleague up in Prince George, Catherine Hansen, emailed me this morning to say she was out running and there was a bear just running the opposite direction about 10 feet away. So it just seems more and more. Do you think we're seeing more human-bear encounters than in previous years?
Well, I'm not sure year over year if it's more this year than in previous years.
Fair.
But as human areas expand into bear habitat, and when we travel into wilderness areas to enjoy nature, bear encounters are more frequent, and it's actually becoming part of normal life. So it is really important to understand how to behave around bears and how to coexist with bears.
Yeah, because in many communities, bear sightings are normal. So what can make a typical encounter dangerous?
Yeah, so at this time of year, bears are out of hibernation, females have cubs, and they're looking for food to build up the weight that they lost while they were in hibernation. And it's similar in the fall. When bears are preparing for hibernation, they need to build up their fat reserves to be able to survive the winter. So they're always looking for food. And bears are smart and they have an incredible sense of smell.
Well, and we see this, time and time again, and we've seen videos of them going into cars, opening up cars, going into houses, opening up the fridge and grabbing the ice cream. So there is that level of intelligence that I think a lot of people aren't expecting from wildlife sometimes. They do seem smarter than your average animal. Is that something that perhaps people need to be more aware of, that you just can't fool a bear? You need to be on top of things.
We do need to be on top of things. And human-sourced food is really rich in calories. And bears know that it requires less time and energy to get it. And it's going to help them pack on those pounds that they really need. So they're looking for quick and fatty foods, and they might get into things like compost and garbage, fruit trees, bird feeders, beehives, chicken coops, even pet food if it's outdoors.
Right.
So,
sorry, continue on.
No, I was just going to say, so eating these foods bring bears and people close together. And over time, bears may lose their natural fear of people and start to associate people with food. And that's not a good thing. That's dangerous for both people and the bears.
And there's, I suppose I've heard some people say, we're encroaching on bears, habitat. We're continuing to build out, and we're sort of encroaching on their territory. Is this a factor in sort of more bear sightings and why we need to be a bit more bear aware? Is that we're just sort of butting up against where they typically would have been left alone in the past?
Yeah, so particularly in communities that are very close to a forested area,
right?
If they have garbage that's not well contained and highly accessible, then bears are going to smell that, and they're going to come out of the forest because it's right next door to them. So every year, hundreds of bears are killed due to conflict with humans. And most of the time, it's because we've been careless with our garbage or potentially even our fruit trees in our backyards. So it's really up to us to protect bears and remove those attractants, learn how to coexist with bears, and prevent these problems from happening in the first place so that both people and bears stay safe.
And I think that's it. It's coexistence. It's not one versus the other. We need to all exist in the same sphere safely. I would love to get more people calling in. I would love to hear about your bear experiences, any encounters you've had, or any things you've found that have kept bears safe from human intervention. Call us at 1-800-825-5950. Locally at 604-669-3733, star or pound 690. And always, you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. We do have one call from Don in Vancouver. Hi, Don. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Amy.
What sort of experience have you had in the past with any bears?
I've run into a few hiking, mostly
okay.
when I was living, we in Vancouver will call it up north, but central BC and Prince George. But the one thing I wanted to mention, because some of your reports said it, the bear that attacked the tree planter hadn't been identified as being either a black bear or a grizzly.
Right.
And that suggested to me that somebody thinks that that's an important difference. The bear course that I took some years ago now by a real bear expert basically shot that down. He said it doesn't matter very much whether it's a black bear or a grizzly. What matters are two things. One, are there cubs involved? And two, is the bear acting aggressively or defensively?
Very important distinctions, and I can see, Andrea, that you're nodding there. I mean, a bear is a bear. It doesn't matter if it's brown or black. You know, how do you feel? Because I do feel we sort of have all these rhymes that we're supposed to remember. Like if it's a black bear, do this. Brown, go down, or run or play dead. It's a bear. What should you do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right, bear is a bear.
Yeah.
We need to respect their space. We need to respect where they're going and what they're doing, and watch their behavioral cues. Just like your caller was suggesting, whether this bear was acting defensively or aggressively. And, those are two very important differences. If the bear felt threatened in some way, if she was protecting cubs or thought that the person was a threat to her cubs,
right.
There's any number of reasons why the bear may feel threatened. And so we need to pay attention to what animals are trying to tell us and learn from that and make sure that we're giving them the space that they need to go about their daily business. And if we're in the way, we need to get out of the way as quickly and as quietly and as unthreatening as we can.
And I love that you said we need to listen to what they're trying to sell us, because essentially, without words, we do have to watch what their behavior is communicating, whether they are protecting their cubs, whether they're, desperate for food. What are some of the warning signs in maybe different kinds of bears for when they might turn aggressive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I have to be honest, I'm not a bear expert.
Fair enough.
So I would definitely want to refer to resources that do have more knowledge about actual bear behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the usual sort of aggressive sort of stance, staring. You never want to stare at wildlife. You don't want to look them in the eye, because that is a threatening behavior to them. And you just want to back away slowly. You don't want to turn your back to them. You don't want to run. You just need to back away.
I'm taking notes. Somebody reminded me that the rhyme was, if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. I think both of those sound like terrible options. So yeah, I think, we hear that we're supposed to make noise. We're supposed to let the bears know that we're there, because I think too, one thing that has always stuck in my mind, I would assume, as much as I don't want to encounter a bear doesn't want to encounter me either. So, I would think if you're sort of making noise and letting them know that you're in the area, they might be just as keen to avoid you as I would be to avoid them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, when you're out in the wilderness and you're hiking and you don't see bears, generally, because they can hear you and they want to stay away from you. They don't want to come in contact with you. And so if you're walking down a trail and it's super quiet, make some noise, make sure that the animals know that you're there. So the worst thing you could happen is that you actually surprise an animal. And if they know you're there and they're not worried about you, then you can both go about your merry business. But if you come across an animal and you surprise them, that's when situations can tend to escalate.
Right. And in terms of sort of kind of jumping in, but things that have been happening around us, we've seen extreme heat, we've seen forest fires, very low water levels. How might this impact, the bear population throughout the summer? Like, is forest fires a big threat of driving them closer into towns, or lack of water making them more desperate? We tend to think of ourselves when it comes to climate change, but I would assume bears are just as greatly impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. During a forest fire, animals will move away, obviously, from the threat, and they'll have to move into new areas that they're not familiar with. They might move into an area where there are other animals that are competing for the same resources, so they have to move further. And that might actually bring them closer into our communities. And so one of the things that we can do in our communities is really manage our attractants really well. And some of the attractants for bears are things like garbage, compost, ripe fruit on trees or fallen fruit on the ground. Dirty barbecues is also an attractant. So if we can manage those attractants really well, we're going to prevent food conditioning, we're going to reduce human bear conflict, and we're going to help keep bears wild. And so I was just going to say some of the tips for managing attractants are storing garbage and compost securely. So in a locked garage or a shed, and only putting the bins out in the morning on the day of pickup.
Okay.
Regularly cleaning those bins is also a really good option and helps to keep them from getting really smelly. Because remember, I said before, bears have a really good sense of smell. So if you've got a really smelly garbage can, they're going to smell that from a long distance away.
And, we have been talking about cities, but about sort of on trails and in campgrounds, what are some things that people need to know when they're in the great outdoors, or things they can do, say, when they're camping out this weekend?
Yeah, so definitely manage your food and make sure that it's not in a place that bears can access. And certainly you don't want your food in a tent with you, right? You want to keep your food securely, potentially in a vehicle if you're camping with a vehicle. If you're backcountry camping, putting the food up high in a tree, like using a rope and putting it up high in a tree so that it's not near you. And yeah, those are some of the things. Also, again, being loud when you're on the trail, just talking or singing songs or whatever it is, just making sure that the animals know that you're there.
Okay. And we do have one more phone call that we're going to go to from Jim in Oliver, BC. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you as well.
So what has been your experience with bears? You're near Oliver, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I live about half a kilometer away from the Okanagan River, where the bears come in the fall for all the nice salmon.
Yeah.
And I've had a problem for a couple of years with them coming around and checking out my garbage can, my recycle bin, and my barbecue. And they'd flip it over and lick it all clean, and they'd come back again the following week.
Okay.
One of my friends suggested to me, get a jug of Pine Sol and put it into a sprayer bottle and just lightly spritz down the outside of all your containers and spritz down the top of the barbecue.
Okay.
I have not had a bear since.
Well,
I do it weekly, and I don't know if they can't stand the smell or if it masks the smell of the food.
Right.
Either way, I'll take it as a win for sure.
It's working. Well, thanks so much for sharing a tip. Andrea, any thoughts on that? Is that a good plan of attack, or better just to keep your barbecue secured and clean?
Well, it's a good tip, and it's working for now.
Yeah.
But they might learn that that's not something to be afraid of, and that they can come back. So again, keeping your garbage secure and cleaning those bins so that they're not smelly on a regular basis is also a good idea. And making sure you're cleaning a barbecue after every use. And if you're not using it, if it could be stored away, if you could put it in a garage or something like that, just so that they're not attracted to it and the smells aren't permeating.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Andrea.
You're very welcome.
All right. Andrea Wallace is the Wildfire Animal Expert Manager at the BC SPCA. And coming up, everyone's favorite gardening guru is here to answer all your plant-based questions. Brian Minter will join me right after the 12:30 news, coming up right now with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Unemployment here in BC and the rest of Canada climbed last month. The national jobless rate edged up 3 basis points, while BC's was up 6 points to 5.6%. Analysts say 60,000 positions were actually added to the national economy, but the growing population and boost in job seekers overshadowed the gain. The man who killed a young woman and injured 6 other people in a mass stabbing at a North Vancouver library 2 years ago will be sentenced August 11th. The 30-year-old earlier pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, attempted murder, and aggravated assault. The judge in the case says he needs a month to consider all the documents, including 2 lengthy psychiatric reports. And as we've been hearing on the show, a tree planter is in stable condition in hospital after being mauled by a bear yesterday near Tumbler Ridge in northeastern BC. The victim was airlifted to hospital in Prince George. The Conservation Officer Service is still trying to determine if the attack involved a grizzly or a black bear. And now the forecast. Heat warnings continue for sections of the Central Coast, Fort Nelson, and the Fraser Canyon. On the North Coast, mainly sunny this afternoon with a high of 21. Highs up to 27 with sunshine and a risk of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the Central Interior, a chance of showers and thunderstorms with a high of 28. You may see thunderstorms in the Kootenays as well with highs up to 32 degrees. In the Southern Interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 31. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, hazy this afternoon with some sun and cloud, windy in some areas with highs in the mid-20s. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Amy with BC Today.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you for joining us for BC Today here on CBC Radio. Don't forget, we're also now streaming live on YouTube at CBC Vancouver and on CBC Gem. And with record-breaking heat expected to continue through the summer, the lush and green garden you dream of may be looking more like a scorched desert. And then with the water restrictions in many areas, it can be tough to keep anything alive. So how are you preparing your plants for the heat? Are there other garden concerns you'd like answers to? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And of course, here he is, our gardening columnist, Brian Minter, about to answer all your summer gardening questions. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Amy. And Amy, thank you so much for bringing this issue up about heat in the gardens, and not only heat, but the long dry spell.
Yeah.
We were planting sunflowers this morning, and oh my goodness, the ground is powder. It really is.
It really is. And so, what are your thoughts? Is this is, yet another year that we're heading into a summer of scorching sun and water restrictions. So, how can people balance that, those two factors and still maintain a garden?
Sure. No, a brilliant question. And of course, in terms of water conservation, we need to do all the inside things to make our homes, if we're going to use water. We're not going to, let the water run while we brush our teeth. We're going to take shorter showers. We're going to do, all the, do dishes at once and so on. Those are things that we just normally need to do. So where we would save a little bit there, let's put it in areas where we're going to feed ourselves, look at food security. I'm going to look at after the trees. And after doing a wonderful interview with one of the instructors for urban forestry at UBC, the issue is the larger trees in particular are the ones that need to be maintained and looked after. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks don't realize, Amy, that this is a sequential issue. Our lawns may get brown for 1 year, but when you start doing it 2 or 3 years in a row over a longer period of time, the grass simply dies. And
right.
That's a reality. And that's what we don't want to happen with many of our trees. And all of us need to just drive around a neighborhood and we'll see the hedging cedars. They're giving us nice, lush privacy, and they provide homes for birds and insects as well. They're starting to die here, there, and everywhere because we assume that, okay, well, you've been there for 10 years. Why do you need water now? And it's simply because of the longer periods, less rainfall, of dry weather, hotter weather, and they're very shallow rooted. So we need to be looking at things like that. So put water where it's most needed. And Amy, just a couple of things. It makes me crazy sometimes when I see people watering with their finger over the end of the garden hose. Okay, that just doesn't work. It really doesn't.
That's not what we mean when we say conserve water.
The water doesn't penetrate into the soil. I'm just going to hold up a water breaker. This is something very simple. It has 400 holes and it fits in the end of any garden hose. And this is so it distributes the water so much more evenly, and it's great. There are other ones here. This one has 1,000 holes. We use them a lot in our industry because, again, better distribution of water.
So it just fits on the end of your hose, just for our listening audience. And it just breaks it up to all these tiny little droplets that go further and cover more surface area.
Thank you, Amy. They really do. And this is a missed one everywhere. This is, I know it's a little hard to see. This is a shutoff valve that fits on the end of your hose.
Right.
And all you do is put it on the hose. And when you're walking from place to place or crossing a driveway, shut the hose off. It's simply and not waste the water dripping. We all know that water sprinkler systems on pavement doesn't help anybody. This really, the shutoff valves are phenomenally easy, not expensive. You have them forever, really.
Right.
The other things too, in terms of when we water, rather than having water in the air with sprinklers, this is what is called a soaker hose here, and it's recycled rubber for the most part. And they connect together, but just run them along your hedges, run them in areas around your garden where the water simply drips into the ground near the root system. And that, I can't tell you how important that is and what a difference in terms of water conservation. So those are little things. Mulching, of course, very, very important. And Amy, just for a couple of moments here, we always find contradictions in terms of everything.
Of course.
I'm a BC spokesperson for FireSmart BC, and what we really recommend is for folks to keep their lawns green. All it takes, Amy, is about 1 inch of water per week, and if you can keep your lawn green, it's not flammable. Dry lawns are very flammable, and you want to always bear that in mind. The other thing is, we talked about the lawns drying out over and over again. It's going to kill the lawn. It's going to keep your lawn grasses alive long enough to keep regenerating when we do get our rains in the fall. And think about all the organisms in the soil that depend on it and soil regeneration and the worms and so on. Having a bit of moisture there makes all the difference. And the last thing is oxygen is produced by lawns, like unbelievably. It helps cooling neighborhoods and so on. So, I think, we have to moderate the brown lawn situation to accommodate the other realities that we're facing today. And those are just a few things. And one last thing, when we water, please water in the morning. When you water later in the day, plants waste water. They transpire it away, especially in the evening. So evening watering is not the best.
Oh, okay.
And I know we're going to have a question about this, but the zucchini simply fall off. They're not ripening because we're giving them too much water.
Okay.
When you water thoroughly and deeply, water in the morning, only water what you need. And in doing so and being wise about it and mulching and all the things we do, Amy, what a difference it makes. It really does. So I think we all are part of this, climate change together. All of us need to do our small part to make those little differences.
Oh, and I think that's such a good point you make. Things are evolving, and we're learning more about climate change. We're dealing with higher temperatures that we haven't had before, and I think a lot of people think that they're really doing the best thing by just letting their lawns dry out all summer long. But as we mentioned, we also have this fire risk that we have to consider. So it's finding that tricky little balance that we're all going to have to learn. I think it is time to, thank you, but I think we have a lot of people that want to find out some answers to their questions. So, of course, you can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690. We will go now to Nestle in Burnaby. Hi, Nestle. You have a question for Brian.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Nestle.
Hi. I have a question about potted sunflowers. I have a balcony garden, and I took the brave step in trying to have sunflowers in the pot this year. And so far, they're doing all right. They're coming up big and strong, but obviously I know they have deep roots and they need a lot of space. But I was wondering if there's any tips I can have just to make sure they keep on being healthy.
Gosh, Nestle, I'm so glad you asked that question because the ordinary sunflowers, the flowering sunflowers, they don't last a long time. They're nice. You wait a long time for them to come into bloom. They bloom, and they may have one or two more buds. and that's more or less it. It's over, and that's really not good enough, I think, for a container garden. I would look for varieties. There's one called Sunfinity, and what it does is rebranch and send out new growth to keep the flowers coming over a longer period of time. So getting the right varieties is crucial. And I know they're big for a balcony, they're real big, but a lot of people want the sunflower seeds, and they come from the larger sunflowers, like the large Russian. There's a variety called Kong, which is very, very large, but those are the seeds for the birds and for us as well. But in the meantime, look for Sunfinity, and they're not fussy. We grow sunflowers in the field, and of course, they're very, very drought tolerant once they're established, but keep them just moist, as we talked about, water in the morning. And the other thing, Amy, please keep them a little bit of, give them a bit of nutrient. I would say even, something like an organic fertilizer, Gaia 444 to build your soil would be great. 10, 15, 19, I always recommend is a good fertilizer because it, concentrates in getting you more blooms. But they will tolerate more drought, but keep them wet in the morning, let them dry out, and you'll be absolutely fine. But do try Sunfinity. It is one of the best varieties of potted sunflowers.
Well, there you go. Good luck with your sunflowers, Nestle. We'll take a call now from Barbara in Campbell River. Sorry, Barbara, I think you have an issue with your arbutus tree. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
It was actually a volunteer arbutus. It's about 10 years old, and it has, over the last few years, there's some leaves have been getting brown and falling off, but last year it was really, really healthy. But this year, one of the main branches is completely dead, and the rest of it seems fairly healthy, although, again, the leaves are starting to brown a little bit and dry out. And I'm just wondering, first of all, should I cut that dead branch off? And anything else, any other information you can give me about it?
Yeah, and quite frankly, arbutus are having several problems, disease problems, and so on. And you actually stop and think about it. Amy and I were talking about, how climate is changing. It is getting drier, it's getting warmer. And where do arbutus grow? Along coastal regions, along the water, and so on, where the humidity and so on. So things are getting a little difficult for some of our native plants as well. Watering it, where you can. I mean, the native ones don't get any water, I understand. But I think we have to supplement the water that we are not getting right now, and basically prune it back and let it do its thing. Remember, arbutus like very, very well-drained soil, and for the most part, they're there. When you travel along coastal regions, you'll see them, from down the states, going to Oregon and into Washington and to BC. And overall, I've seen one in Pender Island that is over 100 feet high, as healthy as all get out, and it's absolutely amazing. So the bottom line is keep it trimmed back, give it a little more moisture. They really don't want to be fed too much. Just, give them their natural environment and make sure that soil is well drained. And there's not much else we really can do. Those are the key things that, to me, are so important for arbutus.
Great. Yeah, it's on a berm, so it is very well drained, but we should probably water it a bit more. And thanks for letting me know about cutting those back. I haven't done anything about that yet until I spoke to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's so kind of you, and appreciate that. It's the right thing to do.
Oh, thanks for calling in, Barbara. And I love that you just waited until you got the word from Brian. That's always the best way. We've had an email from Sandy, and she writes, I have a cedar hedge that both my neighbor and myself feel is a nice barrier between our yards. It is about 9 inches high, and my neighbor is 9 feet high, and my neighbor is kind enough to prune it every year. The trees are not dying, but I don't think they are the healthiest either. I have cleaned out the leaves from underneath them and just gave them a fertilizer for trees and shrubs, 448. I am cleaning out the insides of the trees as well. Is there anything more I can do, as I would hate to lose this hedge? Any recommendations?
Sandy, I'm so pleased that you're actually caring for the hedges. A lot of people are assuming that everything's great. It's not great. And I'm glad it's three things I think we need to do. Number one is we need to refresh the soil around the trees on both your neighbor's side and your side. I like things like sea soil. It's organic matter, and it's not alkaline based, so like a lot of manures are. But sea soil worked into the roots would give them some new energy and organic matter that really helps an awful lot. I'm glad you're putting some nutrient on. 448 would be absolutely fine. Try and get time-release fertilizers. They just work 4 to 5 months over a longer period of time. I think 14.7.14 is one out there, but Kind Beliefs has that longer working period to keep feeding them over a longer period of time. And this is the big one. We just lifted up a soaker hose a few minutes ago on both sides of your fence. You can get a soaker hose just to drip long enough that it gets water down to the roots. And that's really key. We're watering hedges and plants, but we're not getting the water down to the roots. So if you can get a soaker hose on both sides to make sure, even once a week if you're possible, again, once every 10 days, anything, but get water down deep, because we have a long summer to go through yet, probably till the end of September. That's too long without any water, enough water. So if you can do that, otherwise I'm proud of you for, looking after them. And those are the few other things that I would really take a look at.
All right. Thank you so much for answering that. And we'll take a phone call now from Patrick in Langley. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for calling into BC today.
Hi to you both, and thanks for taking my call.
Yeah. What's your question for Brian?
Well, what we've got going on is we're in the midst of moving from Pitt Meadows to Langley, and we've got some outdoor plants that we really like to take with us, knowing that it's probably the wrong season to be doing that. But any advice that might help them survive? Some mature, productive blueberry plants, not so healthy rhododendron, lilacs, raspberries. That's sort of the gist of it.
Okay, Patrick, if you could pick a worse time, I don't think it's possible.
I figured.
But hope springs eternal here. But there's three things you must do. The rhodo you can't do much of, but you need to soak them really, really well before you're going to dig them up. In other words, the root ball has to be really sopping wet in terms of the rhododendron. And of course, dig it. You need to water 24, 48 hours ahead of time so that soil is really moist, so it's easy to be able to get in, dig it up. On things like blueberries and raspberries and small fruits, what you have to do, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but on the raspberry, cut it back. It's not going to survive otherwise. Cut it right, 3 inches, 4 inches off the ground, because it really is a root that's viable. And again, soak it well. Blueberry, same thing. You can't really cut them back too much. But what I need you to do, and this is going to break your heart, is strip the leaves off it. I'm serious, and strip the fruit off it. Just strip them all off. Make the plant go dormant. And when you do that, of course, it doesn't have that need for much moisture anymore. And once you get it solidly wet, blueberries transplant fairly easily. The other thing is have a space at the other end, in Langley, that is ready to go. As soon as you get them there, replant them almost immediately, and use a lot of fir or hemlock bark mulch that's been ground up. And that is the best way on blueberries, raspberries, rhododendrons, to get them to regenerate new roots. At least 50 to 60% fir hemlock bark mulch in the planting hole, and just keep them moist. But making them go dormant as much as you possibly can, and those are some of the best things. Make sure the soil is really good and wet. And Patrick, for the most part, you sound like you're very careful and very concerned. I think you'll do a great job.
Thank you so much. That's great advice, and looking forward to getting them over here and seeing them come up next year.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. And yes, good luck with the tough love that you're going to have to dole out to your berries. We'll talk to Mick now in Sydney. Hi, Mick. How are you?
Hi, good.
Great. Do you have a question for Brian?
Yeah, it was more hedge questions. Is it still reasonable to expect a bunch of new growth on a Leland cedar hedge if it's been heavily pruned?
Yes, it is. And Mick, I'm kind of smirking a bit here because it is the fastest growing conifer in the entire world. So yeah, absolutely, you can expect growth. And that's the one thing you brought up, something that concerned me a wee bit. We shouldn't be, when this hot weather is, we shouldn't be hard pruning. It's okay to prune and cut them back, but do it at a cooler time and not super hard pruning. But to answer your question, as long as the Lalande has water and enough water in getting some food, no, it'll shoot out 3 or 4 feet of new growth, before we get through September. So you'll be absolutely fine, Nick.
Okay, great. And did you say 30 centimeters of water for every week for a lawn?
No, 1 inch of water, whatever that translates to in centimeters.
Just
1 inch of water per week. is enough scientifically. And of course, that depends on soils and how much heat. It depends on a lot of things, but 1 inch per week. And that's out of the Fire Smart catalog, by the way. That should be enough to maintain a green.
It actually sounds like an enormous quantity of water for all the lawns every week.
Well, again, we balance it out. So do we conserve water in other spots and focus on the living things that are important to the environment? And so we're making judgments all the time. But 1 inch per week.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get to some emails now. They've been coming in fast and furious. Margaret writes, what do you recommend for getting rid of Japanese knotweed?
You know, and we don't really talk about it much in this program, but it's a serious threat. And in talking to the folks at the Invasive Plant Council, herbicides are the only way you're going to do that. And glyphosate, which is Health Canada sent our industry a letter saying use as directed. They've done their research. Roundup is safe for Canadians used as directed. And repeated use of Roundup on glyphosate is what our local, in our community, because I did ask them, a representative in terms of the noxious weeds and what we do, that's what they recommend, but not once. You have to do it on a continuous basis, exactly where the knotweed is, and that is his recommendation, and I'm sure the Invasive Plant Council as well. But be patient. It doesn't work right away. It takes longer time to do. But in situations like this, it's about the only way you're going to win that battle.
All right. Thanks for that, Margaret. I hope that answers your question. Bob writes in, how do I minimize the clover that is absolutely taking over the lawn? Any recommendations for that?
Yeah, we're not going to win that battle, I'm afraid, because methyl-prop, we used to have in British Columbia, I got buttercup control and, clover controls and so on. The methyl-prop was the ingredient that was effective for that, has been taken off the market 2 or 3 years ago now. So there really is no real control for clover because it spreads underground. It's really hard to get control of that particular weed, other than, very vigorous hand work on that. But unfortunately, and here we are asking people to plant more white Dutch clover or microclover in the lawns because it will stay green and help keep our lawn very green area longer. So I know we're fighting issues here, but anyway, there is no herbicide that is selective that is going to control clover on the market in British Columbia.
Fair enough. Can you just embrace clover though and use it as a ground cover?
Yep, exactly. That's what a lot of folks are doing. Even I give her credit to a lot of parks in British Columbia. They're using about a third in amongst their grass mixes right now, using microclovers, and they seem to be pretty happy with it.
Okay, good to know. We'll take another email from Irene, but of course you can still join the conversation. There's time left in the segment to get Brian Minter to answer your questions. You can call us by calling us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and email us at bctoday@cbc.ca, and that's star or pound 690 on your cell. We'll read an email from Irene. She writes, I planted a new President Clematis this spring, and I ensured the base of the plant was in shade and the vine was in full sunlight. My problem is that the new leaves are a light green in comparison to the first few that came with the nursery plant. I did put plant food and compost in the hole when I planted. I am worried that it isn't happy. What should I do?
Yeah, and a really good point. And I will recommend anybody who's planted clematis, they are beautiful. They prefer to have morning sun, but protection from the increasingly hot afternoon sun. They're not afternoon sun lovers. They're just not. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And also, when you plant clematis, be sure not to bend the stem. Sometimes with the pot sticking in with a little stake, that's very challenging, but do not bend the stem when you plant. And bury them about 2 to 3 inches deeper than you do because clematis are stem rooting. So those are some things. The fact that you can get it to grow, first of all, when you do plant, that's a big plus. That is great. Now it's just a question of getting nutrients. And there's a couple of things about clematis that are important. Good, well-drained soil is where they love to be. And the time release fertilizers are great. I would say a 14-14-14 would be better because it continuously feeds over 4 months. So every time you water, every time we get rain, it's automatically feeding. And the last thing is clematis are a bit of a lime lover. Sometimes our soils are deficient in lime, And what I would do essentially is sprinkle just a handful of lime around the clematis to change the pH of your soil, which changes very slowly, but that would make a difference. And always, you can always cheat a little bit as well. You can buy Epsom salts. Magnesium sulfate is what it is. In an ounce, 1 ounce, old-fashioned, measurements here, but 1 ounce in 2 gallons of water of Epsom salts is a quick greening agent. It usually is not in the mix of most fertilizers. So a little bit of Epsom salts, 1 ounce in 2 gallons of water is kind of a green up that works really well too.
Awesome. I love a good gardening hack. And here's to happy clematis for everyone. I think we've got time for at least one more phone call. We'll go to Kath in Vancouver. Hi, Kath. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, thanks for taking the call.
Yeah.
My question is soaker hoses.
Okay.
How do you know how long to leave them on to get the water plants?
Boy,
the plants
Kath,
watered properly.
if you were close by, I'd give you a hug because that is probably the most important question. And we don't know until. So as soon as you're finished watering, the time that you would expect that, okay, this should be enough, take a trowel and dig where the soaker hose all along to see how far the water penetrated into the ground. And right now, when things are so dry, the ground is powder in many areas right now.
Yeah, mine is
certainly
really
our area.
dry.
And if all you're doing is watering, you're just putting water there. It's not penetrating into soil. So sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times with water to be able to change the nature of soil so that it absorb moisture and start getting down to the roots. But the simple answer is, yeah, brilliant question. As soon as you've watered the time you think it should be, just dig down a little bit to see actually how far the water went in the ground. So thank you. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Kath, for that. And, as we're heading into a hot summer season, Brian, thinking ahead to fall, is there anything that people should be doing in their gardens right now? Just real quick for a final thought of the day.
Yeah, I don't like the cost of food in our country right now, in our province right now. And if we have a lawn area, could it be a garden area? And we're going into a time right now where you can still plant lots of vegetables. I don't want to pay $8 per head of lettuce. I'd rather dig it out of my own garden. And I would say there's 2 things. Number one, still a lot of time to plant things in your garden that you can enjoy for the fall. Remember, the root crops are incredibly important because they last well into wintertime. And also, and we'll be talking about this, Amy, in about 2 weeks, is the whole new issue of winter vegetables. Winter vegetables are ones you plant in late August, early September, and you harvest them starting late fall and all the way through the wintertime. So, in other words, vegetables are not getting cheaper, especially get into the fall and winter. That would be one of the brilliant things to think about and maybe strategize, even in containers. My garden is entirely in containers, and we just love to have fresh produce all the time. So that's the one thing I would mention, Amy.
Great. Well, that's great advice to end, and that's, of course, our BC Today gardening columnist, Brian Minster. That is our show for today. My special thanks to Miriam Gamar, Rachel Adams, Michelle Morton, George Baker, Mashid Hadeed, Greg Kisser, Mark Fairfield, and Mel Carter for bringing the show to life. I'm Amy Bell, and that is our show for today.